Hi everyone, a very good afternoon slash late afternoon, early evening, and welcome to today's masterclass hosted by IN. As some of you may know, we've scheduled a series of masterclasses, and we're picking up or we're on the back of our first masterclass that was on AI-led marketing and engagement. And today, we're thrilled to have you join us for this interesting and engaging session on integrating business strategies with mental health innovation, building sustainable success with Evolve. Hi, I'm Sahaj. I'm from the investments team at Indian Angel Network, and I'll be your moderator today. Our speaker and guest today is Mr. Anshul Kamath. He's a co-founder of Evolve, which is a pioneering mental health startup that has been making significant strides in supporting mental well-being through its offerings. Um, we're thrilled to have Anshul and Evolve as part of the IN portfolio. And today, over the next 45 to 60 minutes, Anshul will be sharing his journey, how it all started, what was the genesis of Evolve, um, some key learnings and insights, as well as strategies on how to align business goals with a mission to support mental health. And as we all know that it's a very personal and a slightly sensitive aspect. So we'll delve deeper into all and everything about Evolve, and also touch upon how they've ensured both financial sustainability and a positive societal impact. To also kind of walk you through the flow and the structure for the call, we have a conversation for the initial bit with Anshul, and we open up for question and answers towards the end of the meeting. In case there's some aspect or certain thing that is familiar or you are resonating with it during the call, I would request you to be open and you could put your questions in the chat box. We'll ensure that we'll take up as many Q&As and get your questions answered towards the end. Right. So without further ado, let's welcome Anshul from Evolve, and I'll hand it over to him. Hi, Anshul. Thank you so much for making time today, and welcome to today's IN Masterclass.
Thank you so much, Sahaj, and yeah, the IN team as well for this initiative. I think it's great to have people just come up and share their own stories, their own journeys, and I hope what I share today, for those of you who are attending, there is some positive takeaways. Happy to answer questions at the end as well.
Perfect. And Anshul, as I mentioned, we'll keep it very candid. We'll keep it a
Sure.
conversational style today. And to get the ball rolling, I was wondering that we could start off with a brief introduction to the participants and the attendees, uh, the mission and what got you started in the first place.
Got it. Yeah, so for those of you who haven't heard of Evolve, we are building the world's most inclusive mental health platform. What that actually means is that we're focusing on very vulnerable segments or demographic segments that are actually way more likely to experience serious mental illness. So segments like the LGBT community, like those who are neurodivergent with ADHD, autism, those experiencing bipolar disorder. So we're actually targeting niche audience segments that are a lot more vulnerable. Um, and yeah, what we're now a 4-year-old startup. We've crossed 1 million users. Um, and I'll just go back a little bit in time to, how Evolve started and why we began Evolve. So it all started where, I had my own personal journey and struggles with my own mental health in 2018, 2019. Before that, I actually was, working in London, working in finance. So it was a very stable job. Moved back to India and, started to work in the startup ecosystem. So really got to understand how tech products are built. Um, and while I was doing that, like I said, I had my own struggles with mental health. Decided to then actually, take this up as a passion project. So on weekends, I used to facilitate workshops with psychologists, with other experts. And one thing led to another where, I realized that I had that passion in me to actually last for the next 5 to 10 years in the mental health market. And I think this is really important because whenever you speak to founders in mental health, you will always realize that most of them come from very vulnerable space and actually having lived and gone through an experience themselves. And the reason that's important is because mental health is a very tough industry to crack, and that's one thing I want to touch on as well. It's it sounds like there's a large dam, and everyone is struggling with mental health, but from a point of view of business models, from a point of view of actually cracking it as a sustainable startup and a profitable startup, there are many hurdles and challenges. And it's only when you come from a deep place of having experienced something, that actually carries you and helps you really have that resilience to, go through the ups and downs of running a mental health startup yourself. Um, what we do at Evolve is we currently focus, like I said, we're the world's most inclusive mental health platform. Our focus for the last 2 years has actually been on the LGBT community across the world. And again, we did this for a couple of reasons where, we realized that a lot of our initial power users were members of the LGBT community, and they are, members of the community are almost 5 times more likely to experience serious mental illness. So there's a lot of research that has gone into showing that vulnerable segments, it's called minority stress, where any minority group is, a lot more likely to experience serious mental illness. So we've been targeting the LGBT community across the world. And what we've really built is a digital intervention. So, we're a very small team. We're a 10 to 12 member team. We want to keep it that way. We want to keep it lean. We've kind of built out a really inclusive and world-class app, which is called Evolve. You can check it out on the App Store or the Play Store. And what Evolve does is it provides what we call 3 Cs, which is content, community, and coaching. So we actually build out a lot of virtual content with therapists who themselves are from the LGBT community or from different intersectional identities. We offer collective safe spaces, which is what we call communities. And now we're building a coaching and a therapy layer as well.
Perfect. You did talk about minority stress,
Mhm.
and that got me thinking if we could also talk a little more about one success story or an experience from your users that highlight the impact of Evolve on their mental well-being.
Sure. So given that Evolve is actually an India to the world story now, I'm going to share 2 examples, one from India and one from the US. Let me start with the US example first, where in US today, in the Gen Z segment, almost 20% of Gen Z identifies LGBTQ. Um, and when it comes to the supply of therapists, there's probably less than 5% of therapists in the US will be from the LGBT community. So what this highlights as a pain point is a huge demand supply gap when it comes to qualified mental health professionals who can actually truly empathize with members of the community. And we had someone who was from New York, um, who is a person of color and identifies as a lesbian woman. And, she had been using Evolve for 6 months. And the reason is because she initially wanted to actually seek out a therapist in the US, but was given a white heterosexual male therapist, right? And she never felt comfortable even talking about any of her relationship issues with that therapist. What Evolve offered was a very authentic platform where this individual could come on and actually consume content that was developed by a therapist who was at the intersection of a person of color and lesbian, right? And it also gave her that community where she could engage with others. Now, the reason this is actually a success story is because this particular individual happens to be a very influential leader in the LGBT community in the US. So she's also been invited to the White House, for events with Kamala Harris and so on. And she became one of our ambassadors, where she then actually took Evolve to the White House. So she actually took a flyer of Evolve, spoke about it there. She allowed us to actually connect with the US, with the New York governor's office. And so that's an example of someone, whose life we touched and was also from a position of, then wanting to be an ambassador and help us out. In India, some of the success stories we see are actually from, smaller towns and cities. So cities like Agra, Ludhiana, where, you'll have a lot of teenagers, people in their early 20s, who might identify as queer in some way, don't have anyone in their family or their immediate friend circle who they can actually turn to. And then Evolve becomes, that safe space where they're able to actually work on themselves, introspect without any fear of, judgment. And yeah, so, we have numerous users from all around the world who are like this. In fact, a lot of our power users have been using us now for 1 year, 2 years plus, and those are really amazing stories for us.
Absolutely. And just to kind of take a cue from what you mentioned, the success of the platform and the impact that it generates is dependent on the diverse and a very rich set of users that you have. So just as an extension, could you also talk a little bit more on how do you segment users? Is there a specific
Sure.
strategy to kind of just get everyone with, or to just familiarize everyone with the segment of the users that you have?
Yes, I think when it comes to mental health as a space, and again, taking you one step back for the benefit of those on the call as well. There's multiple ways that you can segment your users. Um, One of the ways that's very common in the mental health ecosystem is to actually segment users by the wellness to illness spectrum. So imagine a spectrum where on one side you have, people who are just going through the daily ups and downs, very episodic stress, like, oh, I haven't got that promotion that I wanted, or I'm just having a fight with my partner, very minor episodic stress. And on the other side of the ecosystem, on the spectrum, you have people who are clinically diagnosed with clinical depression, with bipolar disorder, with schizophrenia, different anxiety disorders. One easy way to segment the market is actually think of, what part of the spectrum you're actually playing on. So you'll have startups that are actually focusing only on serious mental illness, or you'll have startups like meditation apps typically, which are only focusing on, mental wellness. So that's one way of doing it. The other way you can, of course, do it is by by demographic segments and by user profiles. So, for example, you take a country like India, the kind of stressors that, someone who is female might go through are different from, stressors that males might typically go through in a country like India, which is largely patriarchal. Um, so you can actually, focus just on women's mental health and focus on specific stressors, really contextualize. So I think, yeah, there are different ways you can segment. From our point of view, we've always actually, we've kind of put the product out there. So even in our first year, rather than segmenting the market, we actually, put the first version of Evolve, let it just actually run organically in different parts of the world. We started to then see, okay, which countries is this actually taking off in? Where are we getting the highest amount of, organic shares? And traction. So that was one way of segmenting the world, saying that, okay, these are the countries that we want to focus on. And those countries happen to be UK, US, Canada, Australia. So that's where we started to see organic growth. Our next level of segment then came from actually, profiling some of our power users. So we actually went in to see, okay, who was paying for us at that time? Who are our, users who are actually using us for 20 out of 30 days in a month? Starting to talk to them or starting to, just profile them in terms of age. So we would collect some of this data on the app in terms of their age profile, of course, location, and even down to other details like, okay, are they actually seeing a therapist or not? And that is how we actually built our user persona. So that is when we then went on to realize that, okay, the LGBT community, and within the LGBT community as well, we realized that it was actually females within the LGBT community that seem to actually be really sticking to Evolve and liking what we're building. So that kind of became our target persona. And again, just to summarize, you can look at segmenting the market and then building a product, or you can actually do the inverse also, which is putting a product out there and seeing what kind of audiences or segments it naturally is a fit for.
All right, thank you so much for that. Talk more about the user base. Can you also touch base on how the discoverability takes place?
Sure.
And the two-part question. The first would be discoverability, and then have there been any specific marketing strategies that have worked well for you with regards to, say, the power users or across geographies, like you mentioned, the US, Canada, or UK?
So the first point in terms of the marketing and distribution channels, today Evolve still exists only in the form of a mobile app. And that was a conscious call we took at the start because one is, an app allows for pretty much the best possible user experience compared to web flows. And at that time, there was data to show that, the cost of user acquisition to install an app was actually lower than if you were to, take someone through a web flow, make them sign up, and then, they've not really made an investment by downloading an app. Typical app marketing strategies for early stage startups, when you are bootstrapped, you don't really have, funds to blow up on marketing and digital marketing. For us, I think what's worked over time as a slow scale up has actually just been really good organic growth and app store optimization. So different app store optimization techniques where you want to keep at it like every month running experiments, whether it's on your app title, what are some of the keywords you're targeting, and it's very much like building a website and trying to rank on SEO for certain keywords. The same way on App Store optimization, you're actually trying to start ranking for certain words like self-care, meditation. Certain words that we tried to rank on, we failed, but certain words like, for example, self-care and mental health, we started to, rank globally within the top 5, top 10 apps in countries like US and UK. So I think that strategy was something that was very important and still an important channel for us because, those are typically free installs that you get and very bottom of the funnel users. So those are users typically with high end intent who are searching for these apps themselves. Um, and we've also made when it comes to organic installs, right? So for us our biggest thing is how do we get users for free, right, rather than spending money. So app store optimization is one way to do it. The other thing that's worked for us personally is building very deep relationships with both Apple and Google. So we've been fortunate to have their support in multiple functions. So for example, with Google, we've been part of accelerator programs for apps, for startups. With Apple as well, we've been part of design accelerators. And what this has done is we've then used those inroads to then deepen our relationship with the App Store team or the editorial teams as well, where we are now top of mind. So for example, if Pride Month comes up in June or there's World Mental Health Day in October, these editorial teams actually are well aware of Evolve and we're top of mind on them actually featuring us. So these kind of features and consistently getting featured on a quarterly basis is also a great way to get free users. So these are some strategies. And digital marketing, again, like I said, we don't have the budgets or the luxury of spending tens of lakhs a month, but to whatever extent we can, we do try and optimize our ad campaigns as well, and try and be ROI positive over there. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And I think what got me going was, or got me thinking was, the acquisition obviously plays a key role, and to go, a level beyond that would be retention, engagement, and retention.
Yes.
That I feel is a derivative of the trust and the kind of
Mhm.
impact that you create with a loyal community that you are trying to build, and you did allude to it during your introduction. So could we also hear a little bit more on that about how one translates to the other?
Sure. So I think when it comes to retaining users, the principles that you would use or what might work from a best practice point of view in marketing might not actually necessarily work with retaining those users. I think that there is some distinction over there. Um, when it comes to retaining users, finally the proof of the pudding is in the product. If you have a product that engages your users and is actually solving certain pain points, or creating certain habits that users can integrate easily into their day, that is when digital products are generally successful. Um, the mental health category as a whole is quite a challenging space, if I was to be very candid and honest, in terms of actually retaining users. The reason for that is because at the end of the day, when you're a mental health app like Evolve, you are essentially competing with every other app on someone's phone. So whether it's a Netflix, whether it's an Instagram, whether it's your other social media sites, it is finally the attention economy, and some of the dopamine hits, the short term dopamine that you will actually get from these other apps, it's very hard to compete with mental health. So historically, mental health apps have known to kind of have poor retention. Having said that, we have taken a very continuous improvement mindset towards our product as well. So it's constantly learning quarter on quarter, ensuring that our retention, whether it's our day 1 retention, our day 7 retention, our day 30 retention, these are metrics that we're trying to ensure we're increasing on a quarterly basis. What typically works is, again, building very positive habits and earning trust on day 1. So I'll just split these things into two. The second part, which is earning trust on day 1. Now, if you think of the mental health space, right, someone is extremely vulnerable. Someone's probably going through, it might be bullying, it might be, it might be a breakup, it might be a divorce, it might be a layoff. They're in a very vulnerable state of mind. If you are able to earn trust on day one, that actually builds a lot of user love. Now, the way we build trust is that we actually go problem first. So when someone comes on Evolve, they're able to very quickly find an intervention for exactly the stressor that they're going through. So that is one way we build trust and love. And then you want to integrate positive daily habits. So again, in the mental health space, there are certain habits like, for example, journaling or mindfulness habits, and we've now found ways to integrate that into the app as well. So those are some of the ways that we would typically build, try and solve the retention problem.
Perfect. Um, to kind of go back to one of your early, addressal or a challenge that you spoke about was, how to crack the monetization, how to build a viable, sustainable business. And I think that's what, I would like to touch upon next. Before we actually go into the deep end and try to, unpack that, could you just explain to the user, to the participants, what the business model is and what different forms of revenue streams and what models you've kind of built in?
So I think again, just looking at the mental health ecosystem and the startup space as a whole, um, one of the things that's very important is to identify who's actually going to pay for your interventions. So very often in the mental health space, the person who's benefiting the might actually not be the person paying for it. So you think of your typical, the insurance ecosystem in the US where insurance would co-pay, or your, the corporates would actually pay for their users' health and medical facilities and stuff. So there's always the distinction between, who's benefiting and who's paying. Um, and that's something we're also on a journey to crack, right? So that the ultimate payer could either be the user themselves, it could be their family, it could be their workplace, it could be the government, it could be the insurance. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. So that for us is a like you would go on a product market fit journey. That's like our business model fit journey that we're continuously on. um, Having said that, when we started Evolve, we wanted to actually focus on the end user to begin with, because irrespective of who's paying for it, if you're not building interventions or products that are benefiting the end user, irrespective of who's paying for it, it's probably not going to be a very useful product. So we decided to focus on the end user, and we said, okay, the easiest business model to try out is actually just make the user pay, right? So that is what we've done with B2C subscriptions. There also, we've been on this journey where we're finding ways to take that percentage who are paying up. So for example, in a country like the US, we've actually taken that, a percentage of, so for every 100 people that come on the app, the percentage who are subscribing has actually gone up almost 3x in the last 1 year itself. Now that is, a, a combination of tweaks and experiments on the product. It's a combination of, adding more features, finding ways to, really keep adding value to users, price experiments. There's a lot of things that go into it. So we know that the B2C subscription business is something that will help us scale to at least a couple of $1 million a year in a profitable way if we crack that. So that is always going to be a focus. And parallelly, we're now looking at, like I said, really figuring that business model fit beyond B2C. So looking at ways that we can potentially offer solutions to corporates. We're now in India, we're working with USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development. We've raised some grants from organizations like them. We're looking at ways that we can actually plug into the public health ecosystem in India and use them as a payer. So again, these are, business models that we'll have to test and learn and either succeed or fail. But we do know the one thing is, we need to keep building a very solid product that is adding value to the end user.
Thank you so much for taking that first bit up. The next thing that I was wondering and wanted you to kind of also touch a little more on was what challenges have you faced while implementing your strategies, and any like anecdote or a specific instance on how you overcame it?
So I think, on the business model front and honestly on the monetization front, it is challenging and every startup is challenging. Like I said, mental health, one of the biggest challenges for us as you scale is your cost of acquisition, cost of consumer acquisition. Um, and we were at a stage, I think, about 2 years back when we started focusing on monetization. And at that point, it felt to us, we were at a much smaller scale, but we were actually profitable on our ad spends. So our ROI on our ad spends were positive. So at that point, we thought, okay, B2C is actually going to be easy as we scale. These numbers should continue. Um, and then as we tried to scale, obviously one of the big challenges we ran into was that, your organic growth is not going to scale as much as your digital marketing growth. And so then, the blended costs of your acquisition, where, when you actually blend your organic free installs versus your paid installs, that starts to shoot up. And suddenly, the unit economics become a lot different than when you're operating at a small scale. So I think that's a problem we've run into. And again, that's forced us to start thinking out of the box a little bit, even on B2C, saying that we now need to take our percentage who are subscribing up, so that then even if our cost of acquisition goes up 2x, if our percentage who are subscribing goes up 2x, we're at least able to be unit economics positive. So I think we're at that stage where a startup, even with your business model that you choose, you need to keep reinventing yourself pretty much every 1 year, right? And like a certain strategy will probably take you 2 to 3x. The moment you get to that 2 to 3x, you start to plateau, and then you need to think of the next strategy that will take you up the next 2 to 3x. So I think, yeah, running into like B2C, solving for high CACs is something that we are very conscious of. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, on the B2B side as well, we have tried to run experiments. Some of those experiments have actually not been successful. So, then taking a step back, going back to the drawing board, thinking of, okay, what are those value propositions that we can offer, or, how do we tweak? Those are things that are constantly happening, and yeah, constant iterations going on.
Interesting. And just to conclude this segment and this part on the business model and monetization strategies, uh, could you also share a little bit more on the delicate balance between generating revenue and maintaining a very strong focus on supporting mental health?
So the first thing is that, as founders, both Rohan and I tend to be very mission-driven founders. So for us, solving the mission, and especially in mental health, it's a space that's, unlike, let's say, quick commerce or, edtech at its peak, where the whole category is growing so quickly. Mental health is not a space which is, at least in the year 2024, where we sit today, is growing at 5 to 10x year on year. Right, so it is a space that firstly requires a lot of patience and resilience as a founder. Having said that, even one of our IN leads who co-led the deal, and very plugged into the mental health ecosystem, has constantly been reiterating to us that the mental health space is probably going to actually open up in India in a true sense around 2026, 2027. And at that point, if you've built yourself up well, you'll suddenly see a hockey stick curve. So I think it's important in the mental health space, and we're very conscious of that as founders, to not rush into something too quickly. There is a bit of patience required. Um, and again, it's really holding out for when the right business models emerge that you can actually capitalize on it, or when suddenly the market becomes really ripe and ripe for that 5x year on year growth. Evolve needs to be in a good position and not run out of cash, or not be burnt out. Having said that, again, it's important in the short term to constantly test business models that can work. Um, so for us, like the B2C revenue piece is something we have been looking at. And, one thing is to just look at your top line revenue, right? So now, if today we were to take our marketing campaigns 10x up, we could take our revenue 10x up, hypothetically. But what we want to continuously focus on is stronger product fundamentals. So even on the B2C side, rather than 10xing our revenue to, sorry, 10xing our marketing spends to, let's say, 10x our revenue, we actually want to focus on product fundamentals, like the percentage of people who are subscribing, the subscriber churn being less, the day 7, day 30 retention, because those are users that signify that okay, there's probably going to be extremely long-term usage for years on Evolve, right? So that is how we kind of balance that, knowing that okay, this is still, it is a patient game, and at the same time you want to also show investors that you are making progress on certain business models and revenue streams.
Absolutely. I think patience is the key, especially when you're talking about something as sensitive and as personal uh, as someone's struggle or challenges and what really draws them to your platform. Talking more now on, the new features and the product development cycle. Um, I was wondering if we could, start the conversation on about this segment on any specific user feedback or customer insights that you've picked on and that's helped you better the product and uh, you know arrive at certain metrics and KPIs that you aspire for.
When we look at the product and our product roadmap, I think, firstly, our roadmap gets determined by a triangulation of three different factors. One is, user feedback and really looking at the power users on the product. The second is then looking at the data analytics of what's, at scale, what's working on the product in terms of, user flows and user behavior. And the third part is really paying attention to some of our competitors and noticing what they're doing. Because, competitors, especially the ones in the US, which have raised, upwards of 50, $100 million, their product teams and the kind of depth of thinking they have is a lot more advanced than we can have with a 10 to 12 member team here. So constantly paying, the third pillar is then constantly paying attention to those products, seeing what are some of the new features that they've launched, paying attention to, do those features actually exist 3 months from now, because they're also experimenting, right? So that's how we kind of come up with our product roadmap. Some examples where, like I said, when we initially pivoted to the LGBT community, that was informed a lot by, some experimentation we did on the Google Play Store, and then also talking to our users. What we then started to do was we started to understand user data more. So even users from the LGBT community, it was important to understand, the TAM is huge. So like globally, it's over 100 million users. But what were the kind of users from the LGBT community that were even coming onto Evolve? So we actually added a feature where, we created a community on Evolve, like an actual community, and users could choose their identity and, choose their flags and things like that, which then gave us an insight into, okay, bisexual women seem to be our biggest persona within the LGBT community, right? And it allows you to go one step deeper. Um, Recently, a data point that really excites us is we've actually started to understand whether Evolve is, and for our power users, is Evolve actually a substitute to therapy, or is it a complement to therapy? What I mean by that is, our power users, are they already seeing a therapist and then using a tech intervention like Evolve as a supplementary tool? Or are they actually using it because they don't want to see a therapist or can't afford a therapist? And it's very counterintuitive, because initially we thought that these are going to be users who might not afford or can't see a therapist, but we've actually realized that a lot of our power users in the US are using Evolve alongside therapy. So now, how do we use that data point and then actually, because suddenly it's two very different personas that you could have catered to, right? So I think the more you understand your user, suddenly your persona changes, and suddenly then the kind of features that you would prioritize on your roadmap look very different.
Very interesting insight with regards to the overlap. Um, and the last bit that we could touch upon would be what sets Evolve apart from its competitors. You did mention that you learn a lot from where the market is headed and what the competitors are doing. So just one final bit to conclude this
Sure.
segment.
I think, something that has stood out in our DNA right from the start has always been our approach to design and user, the UI UX of our app. And that's something that has been, a success for us right from the start. So being able to, I remember right from our first or second month itself, the the kind of user love we were getting in countries like the US made me realize that we are capable of building world-class apps from India to the world. And design is a great differentiator. So today we're actually working very closely with Apple's internal design team to, to keep improving the design and ensure that we are kind of a standout app when it comes to design globally. Um, and that makes a world of a difference. So, when I talked about a key to retention is earning trust on day one. A key part of earning trust is making users feel safe. And the design and user experience is a great way to kind of build that trust. Um, so yeah, I think that is definitely something that we are working on. The other thing that differentiates us is the authenticity of the product that we've built for the LGBT community. So today, globally, we are pretty much the leading app when it comes to mental health for LGBTQ. And I think that's also important because, we could have just fizzled out as any other mental health, app that would have come up and shut down or tried to do something for everyone. The fact that we actually picked a niche and went deep into that niche and built an authentic product for that niche, I think is really important because users can see through it. Um, and yeah, I think the third differentiator honestly is our team. So, both Rohan and I come from a space of really being passionate about solving this problem, being able to kind of have that resilience to stick it out, quarter on quarter, year on year. A great team that is also, lean but very, very capable of, building these world-class products from India to the world.
Just something that I thought of picking up from what you mentioned, the team, the resilience of founders. Any tips that you would like to give to founders who are building out in this space on fundraising and something that helped you while you raised your past funds?
I think, yeah, fundraising honestly is hard for any founder, no matter the space you're in. Um, and different sectors will go through different, cycles when it comes to fundraising. So 2021 was a great year for mental health fundraising because of COVID, and everyone thought that mental health is going to continue growing at that trajectory. Years like 23 and 24 have not been that good, and now we're starting to see some more deals picking up in mental health both in India and globally. So firstly, when it comes to mental health space, like any other space, there are going to be ups and downs in funding cycles. So, timing is always going to be very critical when it comes to raising funds, like any other thing. I think it's important to differentiate yourself well, and really solve a unique user problem. So initially, we were, before we pivoted towards focusing on the LGBT community and really vulnerable segments, when we were trying to be everything for everyone, the same pitch was actually not landing with investors. We were just getting reject after reject. And the moment we went niche and started showing that okay, there's a strong business case as well, and we are differentiating ourselves in a way that sets us apart from every other mental health platform and app, we started to see a lot of positive response from investors. Um, so I think how you position yourself, the story is important, and yeah, timing is very important. Um, but yeah, I think we're entering a good upcycle from a point of view of mental health. Now we're starting to see a few VCs put out their thesis, and we are seeing some deals, like I said. So it could be an interesting time to actually get into mental health startups.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I hope whoever's here and aspires to build a mental health startup can take a couple of pointers from that last answer. Coming to the last segment, we wanted to talk more on the importance of culture, team building, and how Evolve has been able to integrate mental health and business strategies. Picking up from where we left off, um, it's paramount that building a strong team, how that kind of translates to success, etc. Could you talk a little bit more on how you approach talent acquisition at Evolve and how your team has taken shape since inception?
So I think I would still classify Evolve as a very early stage startup. I mean, relatively early stage. The first few hires actually, one tended to be people from my immediate network. So I think that was also something that was, you know, when you're building a startup, it's hard to initially work with, especially when you're just two or three employees and you're hiring your fourth or your fifth. It's very hard to take a bet on someone completely random who doesn't come in through a referral. At least from my personal experience, that would kind of be true. So I think when you're building a team initially, something that worked was just constantly putting myself out there and telling people that, hey, this is what I'm building. What I do see a lot of founders, early stage founders, kind of they shy away from telling people what they're building. So a lot of founders will be like, oh, I want to keep this close to my chest. I don't want to reveal what I'm doing. I don't want, it's in stealth mode. But at least from my experience, I realized that the more I put myself out there, the more I told people that, what, I'm actually building, I want to build something in mental health. These are some ideas I have. This is what I've been doing. That actually helped me find a lot of, the tribe of people that eventually kind of became the early employees. So even um, like my co-founder was, we met at an event and I was just, openly talking to everyone at that event saying that, I'm actively looking for a co-founder in this space. Um, and the same with, early employees. So I think that's important. Keep kind of tapping into your network and people around you, because you'll be surprised, who you might attract from a point of view of co-founder, leadership team, employees. Um, and yeah, I think our own mental health, at least for us as founders, I know both Rohan and I are very resilient. We've both been through our own journeys. We've both developed our own sort of coping practices that help us really dig deep when things get tough. And I know that. And what we try and do is, even for our team, we have a culture doc, which is our evolved value system. And one of the first values is to actually take care of your own mental well-being, and really asking people whether they have the right coping strategies, and then helping them build those coping strategies. And that often comes from can be simple habits through the day, like just focusing on exercise or ensuring that you have people in your life that you can talk to, but really ensuring that you know whoever works for us is in a position to actually have those coping strategies themselves. I think that is really, really important.
Interesting. I think this strong core culture. Could you also just in a very brief a minute or so talk more on how the leadership plays a major role in ensuring motivation and engagement at Evolve?
So yeah, I think we're very, very flat startup right now. So I wouldn't really classify as leadership and non-leadership. We all work out of a small office together. We eat lunch together. We'll do certain team activities and things like that. See, I don't think it's about leadership. I think at a stage when you're 10 to 12 people, I think everyone is equally responsible for setting the culture. So we one of the things we prioritize a lot is physical well-being, because I think that's a big gateway to mental well-being. So one of the few perks that we will give our employees right now is like a membership to a gym which is close by. We actually do some stretching breaks in the office every day, where all of us will actually, whether it's the founders, leadership, or whoever, we all will take a break at certain times in the day to actually do some stretches, yoga, mindfulness. Um, and yeah, I think it's ensuring that there's a healthy working culture where um, people are not afraid to maybe speak their mind, or you know there's a bit of, let's say, psychological safety, because ultimately those are things that will cause an employee stress. Right. So I think just having that open culture where there's a bit of focus on wellness, but you don't have to overplay the fact that you have to focus on mental health. I mean, as you can build mental health by focusing on just a good work culture also.
Absolutely. And I think a great point. Talking about physical health and mental health in conjunction. So we wrap up this part and head towards the last segment, which is also what the title of the webinar states, integrating mental health into business strategy. So let's get going on that. Could you talk about a little more on certain bit of or certain learnings that you've observed by incorporating certain practices into your business strategy, and how that kind of sets you apart as you kind of you know grow and scale forward.
If I was to look back, and again, this is caveating it by saying that this is our own journey and at least what we've experienced at Evolve. In the first 2.5 to 3 years of our existence, we didn't have a single employee who actually left us. So, from anyone who joined was just kind of staying on, which I think was a very critical thing because it just brought a lot of stability and it had that core team that was together for at least 2.5 to 3 years, which looking back was very, very important. So from a point of view of continuity, but also knowing that, everyone was deeply, I think, engaged with the mission, right? So going back to the fact that we were a mission-driven company, just ensuring that um, everyone was sort of aligned with the mission. I think that was something that really kept us together. Um, and yeah, now the way we kind of work together, but I think that principle doesn't change, right? You want, especially as a leadership team at senior levels, people who will stick around for a long time. I think that's critical in building this. Um, yeah, in terms of how we whether we integrate mental health into our own business strategy and stuff. I think yeah, like I've answered this before. We will not explicitly call out something as mental health, but it is an implicit focus for everyone in our organization. Sorry, was there a second part of your question that I didn't answer over there?
Yeah, I'll just go to that bit. So it had to do with certain use cases or examples where this form of integration has led to remarkable success. So a couple of stories would be a good kind of way to end this bit.
Um, so till 2023, till last year, August, we were actually a virtual team. Because we started pretty much during COVID and we chose to kind of be virtual. So at that point, it was very important to give people that sense of camaraderie and team. And like I said, it was a phase where no one actually left. Things that we used to do over there were, a lot of just team calls. We used to have like these monthly team meetings where there would be icebreakers, you play different games. I think that was one thing that really helped the team bond. And for those of us who were in certain cities, we would actually just meet up as regularly as we could, because it's really important to have that camaraderie. And now what helps us is to have certain habits and routines into our day as a team. So like I mentioned, the daily stretching breaks or the exercises that we take, we all have lunch together. Um, you know, I think some days we'll decide that we all make breakfast together. So, we have these things where it's all about just kind of giving people that sense of belonging and going deeper than saying that, oh, you're just an employee coming to work for a paycheck.
Absolutely. That actually brings us to the end of this uh, sort of a discussion that we had planned with you. I now open it for the participants to make use of the chat window and ask Anshul any specific questions that you have based on running a business, about product, about any specific experience or impact that Evolve has been able to generate for its users. Um, and we could even kind of have Anshul towards the end conclude with some bit of learnings and insights. So over to you, attendees and participants. Shoot across your
I think
questions.
there's already one question that I see, um, which is, are you working with any diagnostic tests to correlate mental health and stress related biomarkers? Um, so at this point, we have started integrating diagnostic tests on the app. So these are typically tests that psychologists, psychiatrists would use, but we're not in a position to, use that as medical truth or really diagnose. We are actually looking at ways to now build a small team of, therapists in-house, who can actually start, using that to help people and go one step further. Um, But yeah, I think, as we start going, so we're working very closely with Apple now over the next 1 year. So they've kind of identified us as an app that they really want to work closely with and help us, take our product to the next level. And a lot of that will then be integrating with, devices like the Apple Watch and seeing how we can um, give users that correlation between their use on Evolve, their scores on some of these diagnostic tests, as well as biomarkers like HRV.
Thank you. I hope that answers the
Um,
question from the participant. Over to the next one, if you could take that one as well.
yeah, what is the age that we typically work with? Um, so again, the age of our power users who will typically pay for Evolve tend to be 25 to 35 or 25 to 40. That tends to be, a big user segment for us. Um, Having said that, people in their early 20s as well, and given that, we do a lot of work with the LGBT community. We have, especially in a country like India, where the awareness is really growing at an earlier age. We'll have people, let's say, in the 18 to 25-year-old audience as well. That'll be quite high. But our power users in the US and UK and those countries will typically be 25 to 40.
Nisha, I hope that answers your question. Um, I mean, in case we don't have any other questions, I had one, while I was, making a note when you mentioned the overlap between those who are taking therapy or who seek therapy on a regular basis or whatever frequency that may be, and those who use Evolve as a platform. I think that was a very enriching insight. Could you just talk a little more on that and how that in some way has helped you segment users, kind of target them and get a better understanding of who's actually coming and engaging with you on your platforms.
Sure. So, you know, we try and typically do user calls, and user calls are very hard to come by, especially when it's so geographically dispersed. But this is something anecdotally that we've observed, in a lot of our power users that we've done user calls with, where, they'll typically tell us that, um, either I was seeing a therapist and I didn't vibe well with a therapist, and, now Evolve is sort of, I'm using that. Or they will actually say that, my therapist has recommended Evolve, or I'm using Evolve in between therapy sessions. Um, However, again, there's a difference between hearing that data anecdotally versus kind of knowing that data across, let's say, thousands or tens of thousands of individuals, right, which is statistically significant. So while we've known that insight, we've also now validated it with data at a larger scale to say that our users actually are, in therapy. Um, and again, what that does for us is it opens up a very different kind of use case, where if users are already using us in conjunction with therapists, how do we actually build certain features on the app that can help them in between therapy sessions, rather than being purely designed to be a substitute. Because initially our thesis with Evolve was therapy is expensive, not everyone can afford it. A lot of digital natives are not comfortable necessarily opening up, to other humans, and this is where technology sits. But yeah, this could offer a very different dimension. And yeah, it's early days for us working with this insight, but I think there's a lot that we could do.
Thank you so much for emphasizing on that. Um, we can wait for another question, and if not, then I'll just hand it over you to conclude with a nice closing note. So just let's wait for a few seconds, and after that, I'll just hand it over back to you. All right. So I don't see any participation or question being raised. Um, I Anshu, thank you so much for a detailed conversation around multiple aspects and variables that I believe I would have left our participants, be it users, be it founders, or those who are just general enthusiasts and are curious to know more about how things are taking shape in the mental well-being industry and space. On that note, I thank all the participants. I thank you for taking our time. And just if you could share something or, a remark that, we could take back and conclude today's masterclass.
Yeah, you're putting me in a bit of a spot here, but no, firstly, thanks to those of you who stuck around. The first thing I want to say is that, mental health is a very unique space in some ways. So if you want to know more about Evolve, if you're keen on potentially exploring a role with us, or, you're a founder starting out, or any other interest in the mental health space, very happy to have a chat. You can ping me on LinkedIn. Um, Maybe I'll just end it with one of my favorite quotes, which is a Carl Jung quote, which says, "The privilege of a lifetime is to figure out who you are." And a lot of founders, when we go on that journey, we are actually on that journey to, whether you build a successful startup, not so successful startup, anything, the kind of self-awareness and that journey you go on towards actually discovering your own self is very powerful. Um, and yeah, maybe just end this with a toast to all the other founders on the call. And um, yeah, thank you for doing whatever you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anshul, for that lovely last bit on self-discovery and awareness. And on that note, I thank everyone who's taken our time on a Friday evening and attended today's masterclass. We'll be continuing more such masterclasses in our series, and we hope to see much more participation from those who join in our future sessions. Thank you so much once again. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend ahead. And Anshul, once again, thanks for
Thank you.
being. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.